Hi, Phil. Thank you very much for joining us today. The last time we met, you had announced the merger of IsoEnergy and Consolidated Uranium, and now the merger is complete. And ISO is a much larger company with many assets and many jurisdictions. And why don't we just start with what your focus will be going forward for the new IsoEnergy?
Sure. Thanks, James. Great to talk to you, and thanks for having us. Yeah, as you point out, we closed the transaction in December. And we do have this diversified portfolio, and the focus is really on becoming a multi-asset producer in the top jurisdictions in the world. Of course, we're focused on Canada, the United States, and Australia. And we're going to be very active this year on projects, particularly in Canada and the US.
And I want to focus on the basin. You own 20 assets within the basin, and the most advanced is the Hurricane deposit, which has a resource of 48 million pounds, a grade of 34.5%. How will you continue to advance that project? What are the next steps?
Yeah, so we've got a couple of different work streams on that project. The main one is drilling, and I think we'll probably talk in more detail about that, but the drills will start turning at Hurricane in March. We're going to start at another project called Hawk in the next few days. And in the background, we're working on some studies, internal studies to look at different ways to mine the deposit and how we can advance it on our own.
And one thing, I should have brought this up, but as I mentioned, the grade is 34%. And why don't you put that into perspective for us? Because that is extremely high. But how does it compare to other mines within the basin?
Well, I mean, it compares very, very well. It is actually the highest grade project in the basin, and really, that makes it the highest grade project in the world. And I think it's a bit hard to put it in perspective, but the rock value of our deposit is probably the richest rock of any commodity in the world, quite frankly, ever, which puts us in a very unique spot. And at that grades that we have, it's contained in a very small amount of tons, and for people in the mining business, and if I told them that this much material was contained in 63,000 tons, it's quite mind-blowing when you think about some of the other mines around the world. I mean, there are projects in the world that are mining more than that and processing more than that per day. That's the entire deposit. So it's very, very unique and very, very rich.
And the Laroque East, which contains the Hurricane deposit, has many advantages. Can you just touch on these advantages and how they're going to impact economics?
Sure. So, I mean, we'll start with just the deposit itself. Not only is it the highest grade resource in the world, but it's also very shallow. It sits at around 325 meters below surface, which makes it very economic to get out at those depths, vis-a-vis some of the peers in the basin. And in the basin, you can have deposits that go down to 1,000 meters. The other thing is it's very well located infrastructure-wise, so it's about 40 kilometers from the McLean Lake Mill. There are roads that go very near the property, and it's very close to a small town called Points North, so very easy to access. Again, this will all be favorable for ultimately developing the project.
And you touched on this earlier, but ISO recently announced an upcoming drilling program. Maybe you can provide us with more details. What are the targets? How many rigs? How many meters do you have planned?
Yeah, look, so we're very excited to get back in here. And look, since the discovery of the deposit, it's been very well drilled around the known resources. And what we're looking at now is can we expand the resources on strike? And in the basin, these kinds of deposits, they form in pods. And so we found a very rich pod so far at Hurricane. But what we're now looking for is pods that sit on strike along the conductive corridor. We have two targets, target A and target B, which we identified through a very novel geophysical technique that we deployed last year called ANT. And what ANT does is it identifies alteration. We ran this survey over top of Hurricane, found alteration, as you would expect. And then when we ran the survey away from the deposit on strike, we found these two other areas, Area A and Area B, with a similar signature of alteration. So we're going to drill those. Our plan for this winter is 6 holes for about 3,150 meters. And then that that drilling will start in March.
And why not now? Why do you have to wait until March?
Well, so right now the roads are being put into the project. It's some of it's been weather dependent. The winter came in late into this part of the world, but at the same time, now that it's here and it's here in force, we've got to bring an ice road into the project, which is happening right now. We're also going to drill our Hawk project first, where the ice is ready, and in fact, we should be drilling that any day. We're going to start at Hawk with 2 rigs. And once the ice road is in and everything's set to drill at Hurricane, we'll move 1 rig over there, finish the Hawk program, and bring the 2nd rig up to Hurricane.
So that's a good overview of what's happening in the basin. Now you have a number of U.S. properties, including ones that are near-term production. What's your strategy with these properties, and how will you prioritize them?
Yeah, correct. So we have 3 past producing mines in Utah. They were in production in 2007, 2008, 2009, and they were putting on care and maintenance. Our plan this year is we're going to open up at least one of those mines, and we're going to start at Tony M, go back in underground. Again, these mines, because they were in production, they're fully developed. All the surface infrastructure is there. They're fully permitted. They can be brought back online very, very quickly. And we're planning to dovetail the timing of that production with the reopening of the Energy Fuels White Mesa Mill, which is just down the road, and we have a toll milling agreement with Energy Fuels to process the ore there. So we're going to put out news on that on that work program in the next couple of weeks, and really detail those plans, again, which really focuses on doing all the work required over the coming months to deliver ore to the White Mesa Mill by the end of the year, if not early 2025.
And oh, I'm sorry, can you repeat that again? What did you say? It's going to start producing when?
By either late 2024 or early 2025.
Oh, wow, that's fast. Okay. Bill, I have to ask you about Coal Hills. It's based in the state of Virginia. It's the largest undeveloped uranium deposit in the U.S. Maybe you can give us an update of what's happening on that project.
Yeah, look, so this is a fantastic project. As you point out, it's the largest undeveloped project in the United States. Right now, Virginia has a moratorium on uranium mining. So currently, we're not advancing the project per se. What we're spending our time and energies on is building relationships with the local community, with the state government, and ultimately hoping that we can work with them to a pathway to overturn the moratorium. And really, with everything that's happening geopolitically around uranium, particularly in the United States, where there is a view and strong support for weaning the country off of foreign supplies of nuclear fuel, including uranium, we think that this project could play a very meaningful role in domestic production in the United States. And so in the background, we're working away. We've hired lobbyists, and we're very excited about the project and prospects for moving it forward over time.
And it's surprising to hear that the state of Virginia has a moratorium on uranium mining, given that they have a very strong nuclear energy program. They have 4 reactors working, and they also have a long history of mining.
Yeah, look, and that's where we think the opportunity is. And when we look back to this moratorium, it was put in place in the early 80s, and really it was done at a time that there were not regulations for mining uranium in the state, and it was done so that they could put those regulations in place. They were never put in place at that time because the price of uranium, quite frankly, didn't warrant the development of the mine. Today is a very different story, and I should point out, the state is very much pro-nuclear, not just the reactors that are there, but plans to build new reactors, including getting very active in the small modular reactor place again. So we think it's incongruent that this state would not allow this project to move ahead. And also federally, just how important this project could be to supplying fuel for the country. We think we're very well positioned, and there's a tremendous amount of optionality for the company in this project.
And you also have assets in Argentina and Australia. Do you want to touch on those?
Sure. And Australia is going to be a jurisdiction that we're going to continue to focus on. The 3 pillars of this company are Canada, the United States, and Australia. These are the top jurisdictions for uranium mining in the world. And increasingly, we're seeing investor interest gravitate to these jurisdictions away from some of the higher risk jurisdictions, but also utilities are very interested in these jurisdictions. So we're going to be active in Australia on our current projects, but also looking at ways to grow our business. Argentina, And for similar reasons to Virginia, we like Argentina. It is a nuclear country. There is a history of uranium mining in the country, but ultimately we think that Argentina is going to be non-core to the business going forward. And as people have seen in our company in the past, we have successfully spun out, divested non-core assets in unique structures, and I think that's a place for people to look at for us going forward to potentially do something like that with those Argentine assets.
Phil, I want to move on now and discuss your balance sheet. You've recently done a couple of raises, and maybe you can just tell us how much cash you have on hand, how you're going to allocate that cash going forward, and maybe you can also speak to the level of interest that you've seen from these raises.
Sure, no, absolutely. And so as you point out, we've raised money recently. One was in connection with the merger, and the second was just recently on with a flow-through transaction to fund the Canadian exploration program. Cumulatively, now we have over $80 million between cash and securities. We do own shares in some of the other uranium companies that we formed, and the I would say that the financing that we recently completed on the flow-through financing was tremendously well received. We priced the financing at $6.25, which was significantly higher than where the market was trading at the time, and that's common for flow-through. But we were very pleased and certainly represented a very low amount of dilution for the company. But more importantly, the investors that came in, a lot of existing investors, but quite frankly, some new investors that we hadn't had in the company before. The financing was oversubscribed by a multiple, and so it was a very good deal all around. And those funds will, as I said, go towards the Canadian exploration programs and beyond.
And as you mentioned, the flow through is only for Canadian investors, but what about when you raise the hard dollars? Where's the interest coming from? Is it just North America, or are you seeing interest coming in from Europe, Asia?
Well, the flow through could only be spent on Canadian projects, but the demand, the investors were from all over the world. In fact, we've had investors from South America, from Canada, the United States, Europe, and lots of Australian interest. And then pockets of interest more further afield in jurisdictions in Asia that we've never seen before, or other parts of Europe that we don't normally get investment from. So I think it really just speaks to uranium as a theme, as an investment opportunity. It's gaining global interest, and it's manifested in investors that have come onto our register in the last financing.
That's interesting comments. So do you think there's more interest coming from outside of North America?
I think it's pretty well balanced, but yes, I mean there are investors all over the world that are coming into this company, requesting information, joining our newsletter, participating in our financing, and it's really great to see. And I think it's because every day we're seeing headlines around the nuclear space and the uranium market, and the price of uranium, of course, is attracting people today, and it's really getting that global audience. And again, it just speaks to, I think, ultimately the acceptance of nuclear power around the globe, that we can get investors from all these jurisdictions. If they're supporting the equities, ultimately, I believe they're supporting the industry.
So I want to move on now and discuss your portfolio of assets. You and your team have been very successful in unlocking value for shareholders by spinning out assets into separate companies. And is this a strategy you're going to continue doing going forward?
Yeah, look, and as we talked about Argentina a moment ago, I think that's an obvious target for us to do something like that. Again, I think that what we've been very successful at is finding ways to realize value from these assets, not simply just spinning them out on their own, but finding vehicles or partners to work with on these assets where 1 + 1 can equal more than 2. We'll continue to look at ways to do that. I think we'll also see. We're going to continue to be busy on the M&A front ourselves. We do have ideas about how to build and grow this portfolio. And we're really seeing that bigger companies are getting a lot more interest in the market as we've grown, particularly through this latest transaction. The demand and the interest in the company has grown. The trading liquidity has grown. The access to capital has grown. So we'll continue to look to get bigger ourselves, and but still, look at rationalizing the portfolio where it makes sense.
And so you mentioned you would spin off Argentinian assets possibly, but what about Canadian or American assets? So you own 20 different assets within the basin. Would you consider selling off or spinning off some of those?
Look, the basin is our backyard. It's our core set of projects. And one of the things about the portfolio in the basin is, it's been around and was put together by very talented geologists from dating back to 2016. And a lot of these projects haven't seen a huge amount of exploration work because once Hurricane was discovered, Hurricane really took all the oxygen in the company, and rightly so. So I think there's a real opportunity for us to go back into these other projects, particularly with this new technical team that came on less than a year ago, and look at some of these projects with fresh eyes. There's tremendous amount of discovery potential in the basin, and so I think we'll do a lot of that for ourselves. Ultimately, some projects may be sold or joint ventured or divested as we see fit. But I think it's really incumbent upon us to look at these projects ourselves, and with the flow through money that we have, and again with the team that we have and the plans, we're going to do that. And ultimately, where these projects get to, it's probably too soon to say. But again, we're going to focus on them ourselves to start.
Bill, as we wrap up, maybe you can summarize for us what investors can expect in terms of news flow from IsoEnergy in the coming months.
Sure. I mean, I think the main focus the main thing investors should look for is in active work programs in both Canada and the United States. Drills are turning. Results will be coming out from Hawk and from Hurricane. And then in a couple of weeks, an announcement of our plans in the United States. Again, we're going to be very busy there advancing those mines. And so it should be a very active year. And then less frequently, but to be watched for is news on both the M&A front, and whether that's things that we do to bring more assets into our portfolio, or as we talked about, divest some of the non-core assets. I think we'll have activity on both fronts for investors to watch for over the coming year.
Well, it sounds like you and your team are going to be very busy in the coming months, and I want to thank you very much for spending time with us today, and I look forward to our next update.
Yeah, thanks, James. Great talking to you.